On July 27 through 29th, the annual St. Vladimir's Day festivities were held at St. Vladimir Memorial Church to the Millennium of the Baptism of Russia in Jackson, New Jersey. The Feast of St. Vladimir holds special significance for Russians, who owe their culture and very identity to the saint's momentous decision in the year 988 to recognize Orthodox Christianity as the true faith and adopt it for his nation.
Святой князь Владимир, наше красное солнышко.
The Holy Prince Vladimir, our radiant sun, as the Russian people came to call him, was our enlightener. He summoned the Russian people to accept holy baptism in the waters of the Dnieper. From that moment, Russia became an Orthodox Christian land.
Русь стала православной христианской страной.
Founded in 1938 by the ever-memorable Archbishop Vitaly Maximenko, St. Vladimir's Church holds a special significance not only for the Eastern American Diocese, but for the entire Russian diaspora. Just as, in times past, the Russian princedoms of Novgorod, Kiev, and Moscow united around the grand cathedrals of St. Sophia or the Holy Dormition, so did the Russian émigrés unite in years of revolution and world war around the memorial church to the Holy Grand Prince Vladimir.
Во всех разговорах всегда бывает какая-то центральная точка.
Every discussion always has a central topic or theme. It can be one word, maybe two, around which everything else is centered. How do we properly determine the significance of this church? And what did Archbishop Vitaly, who founded it and laid its cornerstone, have in mind for it? He said, "Herein is lit a candle for America, a candle for Orthodox missionary work in this country."
Он сам был миссионером, он был возродителем.
He was a missionary himself. He revived the historic publishing house of St. Job of Pachaev, and he was obedient to this work to the end of his life.
Послушным этому делу до конца своей жизни.
He put this church forward to be an expression of that missionary spirit that he bore within himself.
Того миссионерского духа, который он сам носил в себе.
He had seen the people coming from Russia and melting into the melting pot of America, and he saw that this was necessary for them to remember their roots in order to remember that they were Russian Orthodox and to keep this sense of their Christianity while they were living in America and trying to begin a new life here.
И он решил, что он сделает такое место, такой храм.
And he decided that he would found this place, this church, where it would be possible to lay a foundation for the dissemination of this idea. And of course, to whom else would you dedicate it? It's clear, to Saint Vladimir, the enlightener of the Russian people.
И в то время русские иммигранты, проживающие в Америке,
At that time, the Russian people living in America decided to create a memorial to this great beneficence, this momentous event in the history of the Russian people, their baptism.
в истории русского народа, его крещение.
Было строить его трудно.
Building it was difficult, money was tight, resources were scarce, but good people were found to help keep work alive. One man's name that must never be forgotten is that of Roman Verkhovskoy, an architect who created the plan for this church alongside Archbishop Vitaly. That is, he determined how to build the church in such a way that it would truly be a candle and a faithful representation of Holy Russia in this land.
Immediately after Archbishop Vitaly presented his vision to the faithful, even before the laying of the church's foundation, people began to flock in the thousands to the St. Vladimir's Day celebrations in Jackson, traveling from near and far to join together both in worship and national fellowship.
Множество народа собиралось здесь, на этой горке.
A multitude of people would gather on St. Vladimir's Mount to celebrate the memory of our enlightener. It was a solemn time, a time of celebration, when the people could get together and interact, having offered their prayers together in church. The feast always lifted the spirits of the Russian Orthodox people.
Всегда этот праздник поднимал дух наших русских православных людей.
В те времена, как
When we came here in 1950, our wave of immigration to America from Europe, from China, there was a most grandiose gathering here of Russian people who came to find long-lost relatives and so on. And so this very much brought us together.
много нас сближало.
совсем в детстве еще храма не было.
When I was a child, there still was no church, only the chapel in the basement and the foundation. But people came here from all around nonetheless.
Сюда приезжали люди отовсюду.
Очень приятные воспоминания с 1900.
I have wonderful memories from 1960 when I came here. We would vacation here in the summers.
Мы летом тут отдыхали.
Говорится, работал и палатки натягивал, перед церковью столы накрывал, все, заботились.
My wife and I would work, putting up tents in front of the church, setting tables, making sure everything was in order. And life was a buzz here. But times have changed somewhat. Now people have become less what you will call friendly, and you have to force them to come. But people came and still come, who love to come and celebrate the feast together.
Здесь было буквально море людей. Этот праздник был центральным в сознании русского.
There was a literal sea of people here. This feast, the St. Vladimir's Day celebrations, was the focal point of the summer in the minds of the Russian community. St. Vladimir's Mount always held a special place in the hearts and minds of the Russian community and in our families. They were wonderful times, and there was a totally different understanding, anticipation, and preparation by the people and the community for the feast.
Вот с каким ожиданием люди и общество ждали и готовились к этому празднику.
The Memorial Church is not only a source of joy for the living. Situated about a mile away is St. Vladimir's Cemetery, home to the remains of thousands of Russian emigres, whose number includes such pillars of Russian culture and history as composers Alexander Grechaninov and Sergei Zharov, and famous diasporan artist and patriot Michael Lermontov. For many years, the White General Anton Denikin was buried here as well, until his reburial in Moscow in 2005. In 1988, St. Vladimir's Church played host to one of the most significant moments in the life of the Russian Church abroad, the Millennium of the Christianization of Russia. Thousands of Russian emigres, with the Holy Synod of the Church abroad and the heir to the Russian throne, Grand Duke Vladimir Romanov, at their head, came from all corners of the globe to celebrate this milestone, culminating in the great consecration of the Memorial Church.
Настоящее единство в русской церкви, наверное, получило.
True unity in the Russian Church likely received its initial impetus in the celebration of the Millennium of the Baptism of Russia. This was still during the Soviet period, the final years in power of the Communist Party in Russia, and the very fact that the great historic event was celebrated also signaled the fall of the anti-Christian regime, and marked the beginning of the restoration of Russia, that is, the beginning of a second baptism.
Падение антихристианской власти и начало возрождения Руси, то есть начало второго крещения.
The St. Vladimir's Day celebrations have continued to this day, being celebrated on the last Sunday of every July. This year, the festivities began with the divine services for the feast of St. Vladimir on Saturday, July 28th. The liturgy was led by the vicar of the Eastern American Diocese, His Grace Jerome, Bishop of Manhattan. His Grace was joined by synodal and local clergy. The celebration continued through the following day, when the divine services were led by the first hierarch of the Russian Church abroad, His Eminence Hilarion, Metropolitan of Eastern America and New York, who was co-served by His Grace, Eastern American Diocesan Vicar Bishop George of Mayfield, and a multitude of visiting clergy. After the Divine Liturgy, a procession was held around the church for the traditional blessing of the water, followed by a lively Russian festival that took place on the church grounds.
Еже во Иерусалиме их на очи купели, я же глаголица еврейский вефизда. 5 притворим уже, в тех слезавших множество болящих, слепых, хромых, сухих, чающих движение воды.
Требующих от Бога помощи и соступления, Господу помолимся.
It is customary for all of the local parishes to cancel services on this day and to join together in honoring the memory of the great Prince Vladimir. But in the last decade, many fewer people have been coming to Jackson for this celebration. Glory be to God, this trend seems to have changed over the past 3 years, and people are starting to return to this annual celebration. We spoke with several of the pilgrims to find out why it was so important for them, and especially for the youth, to come to this feast.
We are Christians, after all, and the parish feast day of St. Vladimir at this church, surrounded by nature, is just wonderful. We have much to celebrate in this feast, and the Metropolitan came, and people come from afar off, in order to gather together, to celebrate.
I've been coming here since I was just a child, I can remember, and I always had good memories of services here, even though the amount of people aren't the same in terms of quantity, but spiritually it's been the same, basically. I really enjoy it.
This means a lot for me as someone from Ukraine, and St. Vladimir was from Kiev as well. But it's especially important for me because when I came to America with my parents, the very day we arrived, we wanted to go to church, and that service happened to fall on St. Vladimir's Day, and we could be here, and every year we come here to celebrate. I am very glad to see so many people come here and celebrate together, upholding the traditions and culture, sharing these with the new generation. The most important aspect of the church abroad, I think, is that tradition and cultures are passed on.
Потому что он нас крестил.
He baptized us, uniting us to holy orthodoxy. We must treasure our legacy. Every people treasures their legacy. Why can't we do the same?
Интуиция князя Владимира, она подсказала то, что православная вера – это есть насущная потребность русской души.
The Holy Grand Prince Vladimir's intuition told him that the Orthodox faith was a vital requirement of the Russian soul, and specifically by baptizing Russia, St. Vladimir determined for all time the future development of the entirety of Russia's governance. Every apostasy from orthodoxy always resulted tragically for Russia's greatness. The Russian people must be united, and the Orthodox Church is the most universal source of unity for the Russian people. Therefore, when we celebrate this feast of St. Vladimir today, namely in this memorial church, it is the greatest of celebrations for the Russian people.
В храме-памятнике это грандиозное событие для всего русского народа.
Весь русский народ, мы можем сказать.
We can comfortably say that the entire Russian people walked the thorny path of their history, especially the thorniest part of this path, the 20th century. It was a time when the Russian people went blind, as at one point had Saul, the future Apostle Paul, and as at one time had Prince Vladimir. And today the process of spiritual rebirth is taking place, and the Apostle Paul, and the holy equal of the Apostle Saint Vladimir, look down on us and pray for the rebirth of Russia. The Russia might once more flourish spiritually, and become Holy Russia again, as she once was, having become so not much more than 1,000 years ago, in the year 988.
Многим более 1000 лет назад, в 988 году.
I think the church brings out a good moral compass for kids that in today's world that is just non-existent. I think it's one of the few places that, they understand what life and God and religion and what it means to family. And I think without that moral compass, unfortunately, this world is going to disappear one day, and our children are going to disappear with it.
I like going to church.
What do you like about it?
I like to sing, and I go up in the choir with my Uncle Sergi.
They're so beautiful. They're so beautiful, and we don't want to lose them to the world. And the reason it's important is to get to know God at an early age, which it didn't happen to me, my parents being from the Soviet Union. And to teach them from the beginning the value of life, the value of Christianity, the love of God.
Особенно болезненно, когда Дети, молодежь перестают ходить в церковь.
It is especially painful to see children and youth stop going to church and cool to the faith. This is a huge loss, a huge tragedy. And so we must do everything we can to lift the spirit of the church, to reach the hearts and souls of our children, of our youth. Because our children, our youth, are our future.
Нужно взяться за это святое дело, самим участвовать в церковной жизни и
And so we must engage in this holy struggle, taking part in church life ourselves and finding opportunities to attract people to church, preserving the youth so that they do not fall away, and making our faith more approachable.
делать нашу веру более доступной.
As the years go by and a new chapter is opened in the history of the Russian Church abroad, we begin to look back at the history of our own diocese to see what lessons can be learned from the past. Archbishop Vitaly, along with other great hierarchs such as Archbishop Nikon Irklitsky and Archbishop Averky Taushev, knew that the focus of the Church must be on preserving the faith of the flock. St. Vladimir's Church was indeed a beacon for thousands of Russian people dispersed all across the American land, many of whom longed to return to Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. For decades our hierarchs and ancestors prayed within the walls of this church for the restoration of Holy Russia. One can only imagine how they would have felt seeing Russia return to her Orthodox roots today. 5 years after the reunification, we ask ourselves, where do we go from here? What is the role of spiritual centers such as St. Vladimir's Church? With the new wave of immigration coming to America from Russia and the former Soviet republics, history is repeating itself in our diocese. This time, however, our workload is much broader, because our parishes are more established and there is a great need for missionary work among the local population.
Наша задача, как русские православные люди за границей,
Our task as Russian Orthodox people living abroad is to fortify the Orthodox faith in our community. We tried to the best of our ability during the decades of Soviet rule and the persecution of the faith in Russia, through our prayers, through the publication of religious books, and this helped to a certain degree in the rebirth of the Church. We are taking part in the life of the Russian Church now, through our prayerful interaction, through concelebration, and our most important task is to fortify our own flock. We live in different conditions than people in Russia. We have different problems.
Чем люди в России, у нас другие проблемы.
Уже в наше время, когда уже разделений больших нет между
In our time, there are no more divisions between churches of Russian extraction. The Memorial Church can assume its true significance for Americans, for Russians, for newcomers to this country, and for Orthodox people in this country generally.
И вообще для православных людей в этой стране.
There is always some missionary work being done here. Let's say someone comes here and knows nothing of the church, and he sees a book or a small cross or icon, and just like that, his path to religious awakening, his path to the church begins. This is the important thing.
Любое место, храм, красивый, некрасивый, в архитектурном плане.
In any church, whether it is architecturally beautiful or not, whether or not the choir sings beautifully, this is all irrelevant. The most important aspect is the spirit of the church. If someone comes to the church and suddenly realizes that this is an unusual place, that this is a holy place, that here people commune with God, then the person will take an interest in return. Where there is love, there is God Himself, and this attracts people who seek the Lord in earnest. And there are many of them in this country. There are many of them because they see what's going on around them. By preserving our Orthodox faith in our historic culture, while simultaneously welcoming newcomers, then through our service we can fulfill the dream of Archbishop Vitaly in our fathers, who are forced to abandon their homeland.
Next year, on July 28th, St. Vladimir's Church will celebrate the 75th anniversary of its founding, as well as the 1025th anniversary of the baptism of Russia. As the Eastern American Diocese prepares for this monumental anniversary, it is crucial to understand the importance of such large-scale celebrations of our faith.
These celebrations are very important, where the different parishes come together so that they realize that they are not separate little islands in the American land, islands of Christianity, but we belong to a bigger entity. We belong to the Russian Church as a whole, And this is a great support for people who sometimes lose their strength, lose their perseverance in living a Christian life. And when we come together like this, we are encouraged, we get spiritual strength from worshiping together.
When we gather together in prayer, our prayer becomes stronger because we pray with one heart and one spirit, lifting our prayers up to the Lord. And the Lord abides with us and unites the people, and for this reason it's important for people to make the most of this opportunity to be with Christ and one another. We must especially concern ourselves with being confessors of our faith, being examples of zeal for our faith. If a large number of us were to gather outside every year in a designated place, say at the Memorial Church, then the people would see this, and maybe in this way we could have a beneficial effect on the people.
How else do you gather people better than with a joint celebration? You can meet people here from all around. People have come from Maine, from Boston. I saw people today that I knew in my youth. In addition to ideology, there is also a certain chance to interact, something that Archbishop Vitaly also welcomed.
With this reunification with the Russian Church, and with more and more connection with people in Russia, the people will start remembering their Russian roots, and they will start remembering their Christian roots, and that they will start coming again to the feast here in the Church of St. Vladimir, and they will begin to venerate their forefather, St. Vladimir, and really start living the Christian life as they did in the past.
The Memorial Church remains the same as it was, a sacred place for us, for our Eastern American Diocese, always reminding us of the great blessing bestowed upon us by our Enlightener, the Holy Grand Prince Vladimir.
May God grant memory eternal and the kingdom of heaven to Archbishop Vitaly for starting that great mission that continues to this day and that will continue for many, many years, the spreading of orthodoxy in this wonderful country, the United States of America.